Hello and welcome to Freedom Watch, your daily dose of raw liberty online at foxnews.com/freedomwatch. I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano here, defending freedom, defending your natural rights, and defending your right to have a government that stays within the confines of the Constitution. On April 19, Americans in all 50 states will serve their federal lawmakers with documents called the Articles of Freedom. It's the work of a group called Continental Congress 2009. Remember, we elect the government. It works for us. As we watch the government's plan for health care take shape, we can only ask, did our government get so removed, so unbridled, so arrogant that it can tell us how to live our personal lives? I'm always asked by people, what can we do? I tell them we can vote the bums out of their cushy federal offices. We can persuade the state governments to defy the feds in areas like health care, where the Constitution gives the federal government zero authority. We can also even petition the government for a redress of our grievances. Does that sound familiar? It should. It's a right guaranteed in the First Amendment to the Constitution. But does the government even recognize that right? Joining me now is Bob Schultz, chairman of We the People Foundation. Bob, welcome to Freedom Watch.
Thank you, Judge.
When we were colonists and governed by a king and a parliament 3,000 miles away, they didn't care what we said. There was no way to complain to the government. We fought a revolution. We wrote a constitution. We put in the First Amendment to the Constitution the right to petition the government for a redress of our grievances. What does that mean?
It means if the people have some evidence that government is violating any of the provisions of the Constitution or any of the essential principles of the Declaration of Independence, that they can petition for redress, and the government is obligated to respond.
A petition meaning a piece of paper sent to the government with the grievances listed, and the government has to respond to that.
Yes, it's a legal document. It cites a provision of the Constitution. It lays out or includes a factual account of the violation and seeks a remedy.
You yourself have been involved in efforts to petition the government for a redress of our grievances, probably more than anybody else in the United States today. What happens when you come knocking on the government's door with one of your petitions? Does it answer you?
It does not. It doesn't matter whether we petition every single member of the Congress or whether we petition the President, the Attorney General, or whether we go to court. The result is the same. No response.
Give me an example of a petition that you have sought to bring to the attention of the government. Give me an example of something the government has done which has directly violated a principle of the Declaration of Independence or a principle of or a provision of the Constitution that has fallen on deaf ears when you have gone knocking on the government's door.
Well, most recently, we have the case of the $85 billion bailout of AIG and the $700 billion Emergency Economic Stabilization Act.
What did you try and find out from the government about this?
We went to court, and we said there's no authority in the Constitution for the government to give or lend public money to a private entity for a decidedly or definitively private purpose. And so we did not want those funds to be transferred, and if they were transferred, we want them back.
All right, we know what happened with AIG. The government gave them $185 billion. That's federal taxpayer dollars. Who knows if it was cash or if it was money manufactured out of thin air. But were you able to get a judge or a member of Congress to address the petition and address whether or not this is authorized by the Constitution or even authorized by federal law?
No, they avoided reaching the merits of the case. Instead, they dismissed it for lack of standing, saying your harm is no different from everybody else's harm in the country. Therefore, take this up with Congress. But our rights, Judge, as you know, our rights are not guaranteed by the will of any majority, whether it's one more than half the number of people voting in the halls of Congress. Our rights are guaranteed by the words of the Constitution, and there is no authority in the Constitution for the government to do what they did.
What happens when you come knocking or go knocking on Congress's door? Does anybody answer?
They do not. We've knocked on every congressman's door with a formal petition for redress of grievances with help from constitutional scholars and drawing it up over the government's violation of the money clauses, its bailout of the Mexican peso. They had no authority to do that in 1995. And also violation of the war powers clauses, meaning President Clinton went to NATO and got permission from NATO, a defensive pact,
Right.
to bomb the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia.
Right.
Absolutely prohibited by the Constitution, and no response to that petition either.
Why is it that you think that something as important as a clause, or deemed as important by the people who wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that they put it in the First Amendment? The right to knock on the government's door and present your grievances to the government. Why do you think they ignored that?
Why do we think the government ignores this is because they don't like opposition from any quarter.
But haven't they taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, and isn't it right there?
Of course. They don't like to be held accountable. They would rather have a free rein, and that's not the way it's designed to work.
How many of these petitions have you filed, have you served, have you sought to have enforced?
We've been building this record now since 1995, knowing that this day would come someday, then that we would need a record. So we scrutinize government's behavior. When we see some action by the government that is repugnant to the Constitution, we confront them with a petition for redress of grievances. We've done this about 14 times.
We're chatting with Bob Schultz, who's an expert on the Constitution, who actually knocks on Congress's door and files lawsuits to try and get Congress to stay within the confines of the Constitution, something that this show is dedicated to watching. Big picture now. Take a step back from these many, many battles you've been fighting.
Right.
Do we still have a Constitution?
Well, it's hanging by a thread. Yes, it's there. Here it is. I mean, I can read it. We can read and comprehend, Judge. You know, there it is. The problem is it doesn't defend itself. Government isn't going to defend it. Corporate America is not going to defend it. It doesn't get defended unless we defend it. And we have the means to do so. It's called the right to petition government for redress of grievances. If they violate any provision, we can call them on it by claiming and exercising our right under those last 10 words of the First Amendment. They're obligated to respond. Think about if they don't respond. What have we got? A government that not only ignores the rule book, but then ignores us, the people.
And ignores the rule book. Going to put it here because I once did this when I became a judge, that they put their hand on and swore an oath to uphold. If they don't uphold the fundamental laws of the land, of what value are they as our representatives, as our employees in the government?
Exactly. No value. These to them, they know it's just empty words. They're required to do it. It's ceremony.
Bob Schultz, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.